Hi everybody and welcome to Matrix Live, Season 9, Episode 1, because we have no idea how many episodes we got up to in Season 8, and last time I checked it was over 30, and Teep didn't get the memo that you clearly only get 24 episodes in this season because he hasn't pirated enough video.
Well, I think he's just waiting for us to jump in, do a Matrix Live, and increase the season.
Yeah, I'm wondering how many Matrix Lives we even did this season. I have a horrible feeling that last one might have been Season 8, Episode 1. So either way, here we are to kick off a new season like old time's sake, except with an interesting twist, because we have a special guest star who is not even really a guest star, just a new member of the opening credits of the Matrix Live montage. Like when you start a new season on a TV show and all the credits have changed, you got like new people who you haven't met, and it's like, why have they gone and put John Malkovich in the credit sequence of the new TV show I'm watching? And then it turns out that actually there is a new regular cast member. So hello, Josh, welcome.
Hello, Matthew. I'm Dean. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we're happy you're here too. Welcome.
And amazingly, we haven't scared you off yet.
Yeah.
So if people haven't had the memo, Josh has just joined as the very first ever employee of the Matrix Foundation, and also, not coincidentally, its managing director. So welcome, Josh, to the official world of Matrix. And we thought it makes sense to have Matrix Live just to say hi and give you a chance to say hello to everybody, and we can ask awkward questions and talk too much, and hopefully the Matrix community can get an idea of what to expect in a brave new world where we actually are properly, fully operationalizing the foundation with somebody working full-time on making it amazing and completely independent, no longer entangled with Element. He says wearing an Element t-shirt.
I know.
So yeah, cool. So Josh, how are you?
I am, how am I or who am I?
Both.
Well, I am doing well this fine morning, noting that it is morning where I am because I am about 8 hours behind you all. I am located about an hour north of San Francisco in the beautiful place that most people will have seen as the default background of their Windows XP install some 20 some odd years ago.
Oh, really?
That photo was taken in this corner of the world.
Amazing, like the classic green sort of cornfield thing with a blue sky above
That's
it.
the one. Yeah, the Bliss photo. That is taken between here in Petaluma and Sonoma in the next valley over.
I had no idea. I always assumed that was kind of Midwest rolling cornfields. I thought it was Nebraska or something.
Nope, Sonoma County, California. And in fact, you'll notice in my background, there's some artwork that's somewhat reminiscent of that. That is the branding for North Bay Python, the community conference my husband directs and I help organize. So really trying to play up that motif.
You know, it had subconsciously made a connection with the very fluffy kind of cumulo clouds and the rolling hills, but then assumed that was just me having played too much with computers over the years. Everything starts to look like a Windows backdrop.
No, astute observation.
Which
Please.
means that if we can see these, it means we cannot see a big Matrix logo yet behind you.
That's true. That is very much lacking. I may have my Matrix t-shirt on under here.
Me too! It is a proper grand reveal.
Yeah. I came prepared. But I do need to work on this backdrop to represent Matrix.
You know, we can very passively aggressively go and ship you the Matrix banner, which is, of course, property of the Matrix Foundation. It's only like 20 foot wide and 8 foot tall, and I'm sure it's what's always been missing from your office.
Oh yeah, it would fit just fine. I'm sure the overseas shipping would be great on that too. But yeah, I am thrilled to be here. It is really a joy to be stepping into this role for the Matrix community and for the foundation. Every open source project that goes anywhere goes through a life cycle of maturity. Right, the moment from, hey, we've created this cool thing and now people are contributing to it, now people are using it, and Matrix already quite massive adoption, and now being able to take things to the next level where, sure, we've got a foundation in place that's holding assets and providing services to the community, but let's truly build this into an independent thing that can sustain itself, that can nurture the ecosystem, and take metrics to, hopefully another 1 or 2 orders of magnitude up in adoption.
Yeah, that's a hope. So where are you coming from? Like, what's your background?
Yeah, so I got my start as a web developer about 25 years ago. I started young, and worked as a freelancer for a number of years and ran a small virtual agency. And it turned out that Josh, in his late teens and early 20s, did not know how to run a business, and so was successful in bringing in clients and doing some work, but truly ran my own business into the ground. Needed to learn a lot more about how organizations function and how to plan appropriately around them. So after my web development and sort of marketing side of my career blew up unceremoniously, I took some time to figure out, like, what do I really care about? Where do I really want to spend my time? I had kind of followed my nose in the path of least resistance into web development. And I found that I live not far from O'Reilly Media, an organization who is part of the story of open source itself, right? Like literally in the room when the term was coined. And O'Reilly turned out was hiring for a community manager, programming. And up to that point, I didn't know that anybody could get paid to do community work in a technical context. So that was eye-opening. And it turns out that for me, though I have often been in technology and in technical contexts, the through line of my whole career is organizing people. And so that was a revelation. So I worked at O'Reilly Media for a number of years as a community manager for OSCON and open source and web technology. I floated from there through to the Google Open Source Programs Office, where I was really had the joy of working with a team that runs Google Summer of Code. Spent a little time at Salesforce helping them start an open source programs office. Most recently was at TideLift. But ultimately, what I've learned over the last 10 years is that I've learned a lot from being in corporate open source, including that I don't want to be in corporate open source. One of the most meaningful things that I've done over the last 10 years is I spent 6 years on the board of the Open Source Initiative. So that's 3 separate terms elected to the board from the individual membership. And ultimately, I served as its CFO, as its VP, led a number of committees, and wrapped up there as its president and then chair of the board. And that was a massively challenging and edifying experience because OSI, this nonprofit that stewards the open source definition and manages the approved license list, it's like the cornerstone of modern software development, right? Like whether or not anybody knows OSI exists or the work that it does, we're all reliant on it. And at OSI, we had the joyful challenge of trying to work on ourselves as an organization. OSI needed to evolve a little bit. It was on the path to professionalization and was hitting some speed bumps along the way, while also fighting a great deal of open washing from people who like the marketing cachet of open source, but don't want to commit to the responsibilities of it. And not only did we deal with that from the VC class, the moneyed folks who really just want to start, I think Mongo was one of the companies that once they relicensed, they put out some PR that was just truly offensive to the community and claiming they were becoming more open while going down to non-open source licenses. So not only did we have to battle that on the very moneyed side as a tiny nonprofit, but also we have a lot of people who have very laudable goals in terms of ethics and ethics reform and ethics in technology, trying to use copyright licenses for those, and also using the phrase open source. And so while that was much more sympathetic, it was very challenging as OSI, the standards body for licenses, basically, having to say, like, no, there's a reason we have this shared understanding. And anywho, I've gone on a little long here, but my time at OSI was exciting. And I'm really proud to have wrapped up there hiring its first ever executive director. I was the last president of the board. Once we hired the executive director, we transitioned that to a chair role that is less likely to burn people out. That was a volunteer role. And all that is to say that, you know, I've spent a lot of time around in different corners of open source, around different types of nonprofits. And the point that Matrix finds itself at is super exciting. And I'm thrilled to be part of the journey of standing up, you know, an organization that has its own 2 feet and can move with them.
Well, well said. I just thought of something, actually. It's like parochial and random. But we actually launched Riot as it was then. Actually, we launched it twice. We launched it in Boston at a VON event in September 2016. But before that, we launched the beta in July at OSCON 2016 in, keeping it weird, Portland, Oregon. I'm trying to work out whether we've met. And would you have been at OSCON 2016?
Oh, I definitely would have been there. That was the OSCON. I had just been laid off from O'Reilly a few months earlier because they got rid of their whole community team among a bunch of redundancies. So I was there, but no longer wearing the community manager hat. At that point, I was on the Google open source team. So we might have met.
Yeah, I'm suddenly getting a really surreal flashback, which is clearly completely synthetic, fake memory, a reconstructed memory, where like the unreliable witness says, "Oh yes, of course, Josh was there. I remember it well." But it's possible you weren't there. You were on some eternity. But anyway, you weren't. Why weren't you there?
I don't know.
I was there with Kelner. We went and got headshots done. So you must have been on
yes,
maternity.
so yes, maybe I was, but it was 15.
I loved that they did that.
Oh, it might have been 15. Oh yeah, the headshots were really good. Like, so the guy who was covering for Amandine at the time, like, well, he did a lot of very good press interviews, and then went and got this ridiculous headshot that he dined out on for the next 6 years. Anyway, so I guess an obvious question would be, how is the managing director role in the foundation going to fit in? Does this mean that I can finally go free and like spread my wings and start goat farming in Sardinia? Or how is this all going to fit together?
Yeah, well, as Matrix's technical lead, I'm sorry to say that you are still fairly bound to the project. Also in your role as a guardian of the foundation, right? The 5-member board that oversees the foundation. Your obligations continue, Matthew.
Can Dream and Amandine? Can she escape?
No, not you either. But the great news is that you know, as the managing director of the foundation, that means my job is to pick up a lot of the things that had been previously done on a volunteer basis for the foundation, right? So there's both the new capacities that I bring along to because I'm working full time on it. But there's also being able to pick up the things that people have been carrying on a catch as catch can basis, right? Like when we're relying on volunteer labor, the expectations are very different in terms of what are the timelines and what are the priorities, and they shift over time. So I'm excited to be able to step into those things and bring a level of consistency to communications, to operations. Heck, to forming our membership and the governing board that I know we want to talk about a little bit. So there are those things that I'll be picking up from other people and adding to, but there are also new things that I'll be pursuing that just can't really be pursued without a full-time staffer on them. So for instance, looking at funding opportunities for the foundation itself, right? Looking at what grants can we wrangle from the various funders, the various foundations that are out there to not only set the foundation up for long-term success, but to advance the state of Matrix itself, right? To further support the work of the spec core team and everybody else who's doing the technical work that needs to be done.
Yeah, basically, it's not technical at all. You're here to provide the framework around it and the operations. The spec core team is untouched, and Matthew's project lead is untouched.
That's right.
I guess I think of it in very simplistic terms as being about money and making sure that the assets and the resources that the foundation has from the donor nations, the community have provided over the years, and also the larger donations that the sort of members of the foundation, now that we have a membership scheme, actually get deployed as efficiently as possible. And frankly, we are even able to onboard folks into the membership scheme, and and the fundraising is a really good example too. I mean, ideally, Amandine and I and the other Guardians would have been spending huge amounts of time specifically looking for foundation funding. In the end, we've spent more time trying to make sure that Element is able to, hire people and support the foundation indirectly, whereas doing it, and all of that has ended up being through investment routes and VC funding onto Element, whereas we just haven't had the bandwidth to do a good job on the non-profit fundraising side. Which reminds me, has Thibaut talked to you about a fundraising opportunity that came in this morning?
Absolutely. We've had a great chat about it. We're talking more about it tomorrow.
We can talk about that here, right? So there's nothing secret or competitive about it. And Amandine hasn't been reading her scroll back. So, because, I mean,
I haven't had time.
It's a great example.
Tell me.
So this is European Union funding. And the way that the R&D funding works in the EU is that you got, I think, what used to be the Horizon 2020 program, which is the massive... like you need to get representatives of 8 different countries and 4 different universities together, and you get $20 million to do something. Then the next level down is NGI, which is the Next Generation Internet, who some of the funding trickles down to, and they do bigger projects, and I'm honestly not quite sure how it works. And then you get NLNet and people who in turn get money from NGI. And we met the NGI people just before FOSDEM at Open Forum Europe, had lots of conversations about how there must be a way for them to support Matrix, and then have been chasing money for Element and not following it up until today.
Right. So this is a great example of the kinds of things that the foundation can do, right? Is look at the funding opportunities to channel resources to the people who can do the work on Matrix itself, right? These are the kinds of opportunities that an individual cannot apply for typically, right? It needs an organizational backing frankly, for reasons of accountability and governance. And so with the foundation as something that has at least one full-time staff member and growing, that's the kind of thing that we can pursue and channel those resources. So the NGI thing is something that I'm still looking at, but it seems very well aligned. There's definitely a lot of funding opportunities specifically in Europe, but there are a handful in the US as well, and there are private foundations as well, like Ford and Sloan Foundation, which seem to be keen on funding open source at this point. Now, I want to pop the stack just a little bit though, because we could go down the funding rabbit hole, but I think what's going to be really helpful for folks who, a lot of folks spend time in open source and maybe aren't so familiar with like, what is the shape of foundations? Like, why do we have this whole ecosystem of open source foundations? What is the purpose of them? And I think funding and money is like absolutely one of the key pieces there, right? Again, an organization can go after funding opportunities and manage funding in a community-governed way that, a solo maintainer or contributor doesn't have those opportunities. So together we can do those things. But the other things that foundations do that's so important is partnerships, for instance, right? As we see lots of legislation across Europe and in the US as well, where people have terrible ideas about compromising cryptography, or maybe they have some good ideas about interoperability. These are things that organizations can band together and do some advocacy on, right? So, for instance, the Open Source Initiative launched the Open Policy Alliance recently to gather the community of foundations to speak out on legislation that could either help or harm open source. So there's the partnerships component of it. There is the fundraising component. Frankly, also critical, the governance aspect, right? So a foundation means that there is this community, a vehicle for the community, right, where we're doing things in service of that community. And if you look at many other foundations, they have a similar shape to what's coming into focus here for Matrix, right? Where there's the technical community, and they're doing their work. They don't need the foundation to tell them what to do because the foundation doesn't really know what they need to do. They're empowered to continue as the technical experts, as the technical leaders, figuring out the roadmap and release cycles and what's in scope and what's not. That's not the foundation's business. The foundation's business is to support them in any way that they need to be supported and provide scaffolding for them, right? So that scaffolding might be, we're looking after the infrastructure, like the servers or the communications tools that they use. It could be that one of the ways that the foundation is supporting is, are there elections processes that need to be run? Okay, well, that's a thing that a foundation typically would do for the community. So if folks want to look at what prior art there is in the world, I think the Python Software Foundation is the one that I look to as the most mature and established open source foundation that is at a point where they run events. They are a fiscal host for a number of projects. They hold the assets for the community. They run grant programs to support other events and further development. I think the dream for me with Matrix would be to get the Matrix.org Foundation to the point where we can do all of those things for the community. That's a long road, but the trajectory, that's the dream.
Yeah, and really push as well, get a bit more the evangelism and bring everyone together as a community, because we haven't had nor the bandwidth or the funding to do that. That's great.
No, I think Thibaut's been doing a great job of working full-time on the evangelism, but I think
it needs more.
Yep.
More Thibaut's we should.
Yes. I think that Josh may not admit it, but he seems like he might have a little Thibaut inside him in terms of desire to evangelize. This is so exciting, and in practice we've been effectively working together for at least a couple of weeks before going and announcing earlier in the week. It's been a lot of fun so far, and frankly, I feel, even if I am still focused on the project leads and technical side of things, I certainly feel a massive relief that there is someone now focusing on all the good stuff that you've just mentioned. Should we talk quickly about the governing board and what's next there? Yeah, memberships.
Sort of things, yeah.
Yes. This predates me, but this is really the primary project that I have in the coming months here. So very, very rightly, all y'all have started a membership program for the foundation, and this is absolutely this is like standard playbook for standing up a foundation that can fund itself, where the idea is basically, hey, there's an ecosystem out here. This is the vehicle to support that whole ecosystem. You, as say an individual who contributes to Matrix or projects around the ecosystem, or you as a for-profit that builds on Matrix, inevitably you're going to have opinions about the direction of the project and the ecosystem. And so the membership program is basically a way for people to, one, put their money where their mouth is, and sponsor the foundation. And so for individuals, that's a small lift. It's like 60 euros a year or something like that. For the organizational members, we're talking between £2,500,000 and £1,000,000 a year. See, I got to work on the units here because we're dealing with different currencies. But the bottom line is that
even in Element, we always do dollars. So yeah. I'm afraid the Americans won on that one.
Okay, well, that keeps things easy for me at least.
But because no one follows the British pound anyway, so
yeah, precisely.
euro is on the side.
So to wrap up that thought, basically, we have this program that's been put together where there are different levels of membership based on the type of organization, like the amount of resources that you have at your own disposal. And what that does is by becoming a member of the foundation, you then have the opportunity to stand for election to the governing board of Matrix. And so the governing board, for instance, approves the budget that I'm going to be putting together, weighs in on matters before the foundation and community. And while it is effectively an advisory board, its decisions are not binding, it is still a privileged body, and on purpose, because it has the ear of yours truly, the managing director, and also the guardians, the legal board of the foundation. So the membership program, anybody who builds their business on Matrix or substantially uses Matrix,
or just likes it, is invested in the future. And so hopping into the membership program is the way to, one, make sure that Matrix continues as a healthy thing that can be stewarded by an independent foundation, and also to be able to weigh in on the future of Matrix. Yeah. And the interesting thing with the governing board, when building it, we've been trying to make sure that every stakeholder in the ecosystem were represented. So you don't have only the members, you also have the managing director, but also representatives from the guardians, representatives from the spec core team. So everyone who is participating into the ecosystem are sitting around the table and making the big decisions and getting aligned on what's next. Should we create a big Matrix conference? Should we set up an accreditation program? Should we take some money, like some of the funding we have, and support organizations which are building on Matrix and advancing and contributing heavily on it in a fair manner, and this sort of things. So it's really giving back the power to the stakeholders of the ecosystem.
I think there could be a really interesting dynamic as well on how it works with the spec core team, because the governance board is obviously not technical. It's representing basically the Matrix ecosystem in a sort of concrete voting capacity.
Yeah.
But a really obvious thing is, like, what things should the spec core team be focusing on? We've got 500 odd MSCs out there, and figuring out which ones to prioritize is done at the moment by the spec core team, and in practice it's mainly done by Travis, based on kind of synthesizing all the feedback that he sees in the office for the spec core team room, as well as looking at just what the proposals are. But it's still slightly shooting from the hip, and it's often pretty obvious what you have to work on, and nobody would disagree that if there is a bug in the current room version, we need to get a new room version out with an MSC that fixes that bug. But sometimes it's not so obvious, like, I don't know, ratifying custom emojis and merging them into the spec is probably the favorite one from the community, because it happens that the original Matrix team working at Element, for whatever reason, incorrectly in my opinion, it's never risen to the top of the do list. Instead, everyone else has gone and done it anyway based on the MSc. Why isn't that in the spec? How important is it for it to be in the spec relative to other things? Where does it go in? And frankly, getting some data points from the people in the governing board to say, well, yeah, I mean, of all the MSCs we see out there, we think that one perhaps should be bumped up a bit. This will be the avenue to do so. So that's how, hopefully, the two sides, the technical and the something to do with money side, work together.
I think you've highlighted something very important in that, is that it is a way for people to be represented and to be heard, right? This is the quality of any mature community, frankly, is that there are known pathways for providing feedback, and there are bodies that can hash that out. It's one thing to have people know, like, okay, well, the spec core team and the project tech lead are clearly people whose ears I want to bend with my views on the direction of things. Frankly, however, that is also really adding burden to people who, in many cases, are doing this on a volunteer basis, right? So it's no secret that in the world of open source, maintainers are often overburdened. And so while we ask the spec core team to do quite a lot in their role, it's a kindness that we can offer by creating other avenues for feedback that they can weigh in on, so that they don't necessarily have to be the first person or the first group of people that somebody goes to with these things. We can help facilitate conversations and create those other channels to hash out feedback in the direction of the project.
Yeah. TLDR, you're using Matrix, you like Matrix, you want to have a say, click on the button or go to matrix.org/membership.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
I look forward to hearing from you.
And you will know everything about it, and Josh will reply to you nicely by email. Or maybe Tim.
That's right.
That's,
Cool. All right. We've been waffling on for ages. People are going to start to drift off and sort of fall asleep in their cornflakes and things. I was thinking we could do a very turbo quick what's happening this week in Matrix, Amandine, like we used to when we were young.
Yeah. So we had, there's been lots of noise, as Josh touched on earlier, around the online safety bill.
Yeah, complete nightmare. As in, people have probably seen the news in the last 24 hours where loads of people put out headlines saying the UK has stepped down on wanting to undermine end-to-end encryption. The spy clause is removed from the online safety bill. And it is not true at all. It's really disturbing to the extent that it almost feels like a misinformation campaign. Like, this is the most critical moment of debating the online safety bill was yesterday in the House of Lords. This was the final opportunity to make concrete changes to the bill, and it failed. There were no changes. In fact, it got a bit worse around age verification. However, a junior minister popped up saying, but don't worry about the scanning. We're only going to force it on people once it's technically feasible. And for whatever reason, a certain centralized end-to-end encrypted chat system got very excited and declared it as a win and put out tweets saying that it's so proud of having won against the system and congratulating everybody who'd helped them with this victory. And the Financial Times put out this story saying UK government steps down, except they didn't. So it's the absolute worst case scenario that the point where the final Hail Marys are meant to be done from everybody frantically saying, no, seriously, this is a catastrophe, please can we protect encryption? Instead, all the people who should be saying that are busy clapping each other on the back and doing interviews with journalists about how amazing they are because they saved the day when they didn't. As in, I cannot overstate how disturbing this is. And I spoke to a nice journalist at the Register yesterday, said literally this verbatim to him, and perversely, it turned out I'd already written the story and it went live whilst we were talking, and the headline was UK removes spy clause from online safety bill. So if in years to come, people go and look back on this period of history and wonder how humanity managed to make end-to-end encryption illegal, you might be able to trace it back to the events of the last 24 hours where confused people decided to celebrate not just prematurely, but just at random, and undermine the entire future of privacy on the internet. So thanks, Signal.
But there were better news. Was it yesterday? Yes, yesterday. We have Element X Android who actually hit the Play Store.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
If you're not using Element X on Android, go to play.google.com and grab it and give us a 5-star review, because ironically, Element X is currently at 5.0, like unilaterally positive reviews on both iOS and Android, and it's not just me and Amandine. Then also it's worth noting that the Android build is basically a foreshadowing, a precursor of things to come. It is coming up to speed to parity with the iOS app, but in a couple of weeks we hope that there is going to be the ignition of a big bang of Element X goodness, which will also coincide, we suspect, with at least saying all that stuff about Matrix 2.0 that we talked about at FOSDEM is actually now concrete and something that anybody can play with using Element X as the world's first Matrix 2.0 client. And that means native OIDC for authentication. It means native VoIP using beautiful Element Cool. It means sliding sync for amazing performance.
Element Cool,
precisely.
nicely showcased.
Well, that's why I called it beautiful. I didn't want to hurt its feelings whilst we're using it. Otherwise it might crash or something. Not that it ever crashes. And also faster joins to some extent, but that's not so user-facing. So at the risk of having just completely blown the punchline 2 weeks or whatever it is in advance, that just feel warned, gentle Matrix Live viewer, that big things are afoot, and there hopefully will be much noise with whatever version released this will be of Element X, and not just for Element X, really for the whole Matrix ecosystem. The Matrix 2.0 is actually coming, and I wasn't lying when I stood on stage in Brussels and told everybody it was going to change the world and be amazing.
I wonder if we should have waited 6 months and for the 10th year's birthday.
No, I don't think we should have randomly waited 6 months.
I'm joking.
Don't joke about these things. Give me a heart attack.
Another excuse to celebrate.
Yeah, precisely. We can. On the plus side, it'll still be shipping stuff. I mean, actually, perhaps we can aim to merge Matrix 2.0 into the spec. Like, it will be about 6 months, I imagine, before all the MSCs are finally shaken out and reviewed and FCP'd and merged in. So that could be a kind of cool thing. It goes and shows us the amazing fast pacing and tempo of Matrix that we manage a major version release every decade. Anyway, cool. So I think that's the main things which have been happening in Matrix land, at least from our slightly myopic viewpoint of the world. Any last thoughts from you, Josh?
I'll just say big things are happening in Matrix, and I look forward to seeing people. I think they just announced FOSDEM 2024 dates. I look forward to seeing people around that.
February the 3rd and 4th, ULB.
That's right.
Already in my calendar. And something else I was going to say. Oh yes, fair warning that if you talk to people behind the matrix.org social media handles on the hellscape that was Twitter, or the Brave New World that is Mastodon, or the weird niche thing with lots of porn that is Blue Sky, then no longer will you just be talking to me and sometimes a traumatized Deep, but you might also be talking to Josh. Possibly both at the same time as we stumble over the top of each other, frantically trying to do completely contradictory damage limitation to whatever tweet or whatever is happening, but it's all part of life's rich tapestry. Cool.
Exciting.
Right.
Indeed. Welcome, Josh. Thanks for enduring your first, and I'm sure not last, Matrix Live. And thank you, everybody, for flying Matrix. Have an amazing weekend by the time you listen to this, although it's a Thursday today, but it's a Friday in my heart. And speak to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Good.